My office is right downtown as well, in the DuPont building. I'm in the mill.
Okay.
Oh, you're in
So
the
I'm
mill.
not far from you.
Yes, I
Very
used to be
nice.
in the mill once
Yeah.
upon a time. I've done the
Yeah.
tour of duty, been there, done that.
Yeah, you've done them all.
I've done them
Well, we
all.
downsized from Hocassin and out of our commercial space prior to the pandemic.
Welcome to the Delaware State Chamber of Commerce's Conversation with Kelly. Today we are back in CSC Station, right on the Christina River in downtown Wilmington, and we're here to talk about data. Or maybe it's data. I will ask you both which one it is in a minute. This is the perfect place to be doing it because actually the Delaware Data Innovation Lab is housed here. We've all heard the term, but do we really know what it means? How do we use it? How do we collect it? When do we collect it? All questions I have for our guests today. And when we truly do harness the power of data, really strategic decisions can be made. Now, I am not an expert on the topic, so thankfully I have two experts with me. First is Ryan Harrington with the Delaware Data Innovation Lab, and I also have Tanya Williamson. Well, you're the founder of Married to the Ring, but I know you have more than one business. So Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure thing. So my background did not start in data. Actually, I started as a teacher. So I came to Delaware originally through Teach for America, and it was there where I figured out I had this love for data. We were trying to use more data in the classroom to make decisions about how to help our students, and I just felt like we weren't doing a great job of it. A couple years later, realized that there was a chance to maybe explore that further. So I got a master's degree in it, eventually went and led a data science team, and now I'm with the Delaware Data Innovation Lab, and here we are.
So data versus data, you say data.
I mostly say data, but sometimes I slip and I say data. So I'm gonna be confusing today, and I'm
You're
sorry.
just gonna switch back and forth.
I am.
Makes it even more confusing for all of us.
I know, sorry, but not really.
Tanya, tell us a little bit about yourself and your businesses.
So it's interesting, just listening to Ryan, I actually started out in corporate America, and in corporate America, I ran and led an MIS team, which is where I was forced to learn about data and how to query information in order to do strategic moves within our processes. So when I crossed over into the entrepreneurship space, I knew initially that marketing plan, we had to extract data, in order to understand specifically what our targeted market was, our audience, and how we were going to be able to navigate through systematically. And so through all of our enterprises across our companies, we've been able to use data to successfully work with our clients.
I say she's a data person.
I was just gonna say, you're consistent with data.
Yes, I'm a data gal.
Great.
This is gonna be the argument the whole time now.
2 against 1 on data over here. So with that, let's launch into the conversation. Ryan, large corporations have been data mining for years. They're very well versed in how to collect it, how to use it. Can you kind of just talk about what that means?
Yeah, so data is really good to help you with strategy, really. So you can't just have data for data's sake. Data is there for a purpose. It's there for you to connect it to your strategic decision making, to help you make decisions, to create a feedback loop so that you can go from this is what I think the outcome will be, you test it and measure it, and then you bring it back to make an informed decision. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that, from at the base level, just collecting it and reporting on it, to some of the more advanced things like artificial intelligence or name your jargon and buzzwords in that space. And there's a full spectrum that goes in between. But I don't know, it sounds like you did that in the corporate space. I'd love to hear about what that meant for you.
And that's exactly what I wanted to experience when I transferred over into the entrepreneurship space. I wanted automation. I wanted smart processes, and I wanted to do business smart. And so Married to the Ring, although it just turned 5 years old, and we're talking about 3 years of that was primarily the pandemic, right? But the first 2 years, we were able to, through data, serve 7 states and 2 countries.
Wow.
And so that spoke to the data that we were able to access based upon our targeted market, based upon where the problem or the need existed. And one of the greatest parts about being able to have data is we also discovered that at that time, prior to the pandemic, when we started to develop our exportation plan to do business with other countries, we actually found that our feasible plan had to change slightly in order to meet the needs with our partners across the world. And so without that data, we wouldn't have been able to size up specifically what type of product or service we should even extend to that specific market.
Interesting. So, you know, you have more than one business, but like, is there a trend in a type of data that you're looking for across the board, or is it very unique to your business?
I believe, well, in our situation, it's unique to your industry. And one of the things that I'm a strategic thought leader. We're not just doing business to do business, right? We need to make sure that we're creating business models where we do beta tests, because that's what I adopted from corporate world, to see whether or not the outcome is a good fit for a specific market. And so when I look at Married to the Ring, we'll use Married to the Ring as an example. When we were developing a relationship-based product for other countries, we discovered that what we did in the US was less favorable than those other countries. They were actually ahead of the game. We just had a differentiator. The service for that specific product was more needed in the US than it was, because at that time the divorce rate in the US was extremely high in compared to the other countries. However, post the pandemic and during the pandemic, it heightened the fact that the divorce rate, if we're talking about that specific product, was now a global issue. So that meant that we had to tailor our data to support the need of those specific areas. And that's just one example.
That keeps your organization relevant.
It keeps us relevant, it keeps us ahead, and we're not servicing, we're not just providing services to just anyone. We're providing services to those who truly need it, but we're also providing services that provides an impact, you know, to that specific area.
And I actually want to back you up a little bit. So we had a chance to talk a little bit briefly before we started recording this.
Yes.
And Married to the Ring is a very unique company. Can you just explain what it is and what it does and how it's evolved?
Absolutely. So Married to the Ring is a relationship building organization. We provide solutions to the government, faith-based organizations, as well as corporations and consumers. We initially started off, it's interesting, we dealt with marriage couples initially, but we found out that married couples issues in terms of relationships bled into the workplace, which ultimately affected performance in the workplace and also attrition. And as a result of that, we then evolved into providing services to corporations that just helps relationship building, period, on how individuals should be able to work strategically with other individuals and understand that how they work in the workplace affects their performance personally and vice versa. And so now we're excited because we have a specific model that literally is developed and we provide to corporations for selling.
Very cool. Ryan, I want to go back to you for a second. Because you work with so many different businesses and kind of help them implement different models, is there a best practice or tips that you would be saying is worth highlighting?
Like in terms of getting started with data, essentially?
Kind of like beginner's level.
Yeah, definitely. So like I said before, data always connects back to strategy. So I think the number one mistake I see people make is they almost see data as being a solve all the problems type of solution. You know, just use data and like we're going to solve our problems. That's fine. That's not really the case. So if you really have to have a specific question that you're trying to solve as you're getting started. So concentrate on one thing first, and then get your house in order from there. So if you want to answer that one specific question, walk yourself backwards. What is the data I would need to answer that? Over what period of time? How much of it? What type? Am I collecting that data in the first place? Then start to think about, am I storing that data in the right way? What do I need to analyze it? So it's really just slowly walking yourself up. A lot of times I talk about data as being kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs in some ways. You can like imagine that pyramid for yourself, and all the way at the base of it is just, is my data right in the first place? Data is the ultimate place for garbage in, garbage out. If I'm collecting garbage, my analysis will be garbage. So get your house in order and then slowly build yourself up that pyramid to the more interesting, cool stuff.
I will ask both of you this question. What are maybe the first 3 questions that you ask yourselves, or in your case, offer to a client when you're starting the process of identifying that problem and figuring out what the solution is?
So what we've done is we actually collect data up front by providing a questionnaire that provides us with a situational outcome. We're able to see almost like a high, medium, low, because we did our due diligence beforehand to say these are the type of questions that we would ask in order to get to the answer that we're looking for, and so that we can categorize them into the appropriate product, right? And with that information, back to your point, it's like we go up a scale. So if this is the outcome of the data that they supply to us in the questionnaire, this is the systemic program that we're going to provide to that client. And it's all automated. So we've actually, through data, been able to develop decision trees to build into our back-end process to make sure that we're also systematically reaching the outcome, as well as through the client experience, reaching the outcome. Did that answer your question?
It did.
Yeah, I love that you're kind of proactively building some of those systems. And a lot of the people coming to us are not necessarily that proactive.
They don't
right?
have that mindset.
They're like starting to get to that point, but not necessarily there yet. And so a lot of times someone will come to us with a partially formed business question, and it's our job as a team to strip the layers back from it. It's basically just asking why and how a lot of times over and over again until you strip an idea to its core essence. One of the biggest problems we find as well is people don't actually know the types of questions that you can ask of data and how to formulate those questions. So when I'm thinking in the predictive analytics space, that can often be questions of, can I predict the likelihood of something to occur? That's the idea of a supervised data set versus an unsupervised data set. So like I know the outcomes and I can predict it, or I don't know the outcomes and I can try to find patterns in it, right? So there's like that level of customer education that has to happen as well.
And what I love about what you just said, which was very important, is because I have a master's in business and also a concentration in Homeland Security, for me, when I'm servicing the clients, I automatically have that hat of data. And that's what allows us to look at the questions up front, because we understand that in my world, when you're servicing families or you're servicing corporations, there's a lot of regulatory risk. If I don't apply the regulatory regulatory standards within servicing those bases, then I can't do business in those spaces. And so, to your point, I think it's only because of the comprehensive experience in my background that allows me to think from a data perspective on how to best run our business models. So you're absolutely right. I see it frequently with my peer group. Like, why are you thinking? But I have a tech. I've always had a tech. So when I talk about having a tech as a business, I explore techs across the globe. So during the pandemic, I had one in South Africa and I had one in Florida to help me make sure that we're constantly looking at tools and models to automate our processes.
Sure.
Wow, about half of that went over my head. You basically are describing like a skill set that I just simply don't have. And I wonder though, how many people really actually have that skill set? I mean, from the Chamber's perspective, we've asked this question a few times to people, and I'll cite specifically Brookfield Property, who owns Christiana Mall. We had their CEO speak at an event a couple years ago. Theme was data. And we said, what is the number one type of job that you're hiring for? And it was data analysts. He's in this just like dire need of data analysts, but he can't really find people like that. And you're basically describing that you developed yourself into that. How does someone stumble into the field and learn?
I mean, it's a huge emerging field right now. So over the last decade in particular, it's gone to being basically the hottest job in the market, essentially. A few years back, the Harvard Business Review literally called data science the hottest job in the country, in the world, essentially.
And that was probably the first time anyone ever saw the term.
In the general public, probably. It's
Yeah.
been percolating in the background for a long time, though. So there's a lot of places you can find it. There's a lot of university programs that are starting to be developed around that. So as a great example, University of Delaware has built an interdisciplinary data science institute. And that's one of the interesting things about data is that the people can actually come from a lot of different places, right? So if I'm thinking at the university level, if I'm a psychologist, I'm using data all the time. I have those tools. I could be in computer science. I could be in electrical engineering. There's a lot of places that that persona already exists.
Right.
It's just kind of removing them from the domain and saying, hey, this skill set doesn't need to apply to electrical engineering anymore. It can apply to a marketing need or whatever else it might be. I think one of the things that can be really confusing for people is there's a lot of different type of data people out there.
Right.
You mentioned data analysts. That's different than a data scientist. That's different than a data engineer. That's different from I can probably name 15 more of those types of positions. And that can be confusing for people to start to navigate. So a lot of interesting questions there to deal with.
And you nailed it. And individuals usually don't understand that until they start to delve into it. Because we had to hire a data scientist to be able to do some of the mechanics of the back end of our operations, because a user entry or a data entry person did not have the specific skill set to be able to execute on our behalf. But it wasn't until we got our feet wet that we had individuals be able to explain that level of detail to us, but that was after we got the data. And just to chime in on the part where you talked about UD, University of Delaware is absolutely phenomenal. And from the conception phase of our business, the University of Delaware, just their business library, the data mining and extracting information, even for us to do our global or consider global business, the global industry doesn't use NACS codes. They use different codes. And although we have the World Trade Center assisting us, we are the type of business that we run is not a normal export of services to other countries. So, you know, I give a shout out to Paulie out there. He's phenomenal, but his specialty is in this, and helping with the research. And that gentleman spent hours helping us extract, doing different decision trees and working through the logistics. I applaud UD for the efforts that they've done to be able to impact the small business community here in the state of Delaware.
That's great. And you know, I'll transition a little bit to the Delaware Data Innovation Lab. We haven't necessarily dove into that yet, but it's relatively new. Do you want to talk about how it was born?
Yeah, I definitely can. So if we go back to the beginning of the pandemic, so it's March 2020 and the world changes in a day. Overnight.
One day.
The world breaks, essentially, right?
Yes.
And so at the time, I was with a consulting firm based in Wilmington, Compass Red Data Labs, and we're primarily servicing for-profit companies, name brand, big companies that you've definitely heard of in the area. And like I said, overnight the world changed. And so we're sitting there trying to think of how can we take this skill set we have as data scientists, data engineers, and make this a reality so that we can help augment the work of people trying to help the world. The world is in need. Fast forward a few months, we put together a proposal for CARES Act funding from Newcastle County, and Matt Meyer and his team took a risk and funded the data lab. We were able to bring on about 30 people right away, short-term roles at that point to build proof of concept projects. And the whole goal is to use data for social good. So us as an organization now, a few things have changed since that time, but what has remained the same is we're primarily helping mission-driven organizations to meet the needs of the population around us. So that ends up being a lot of state government. We do a lot of work with the state of Delaware through a few different departments. Could also be mission-driven organizations like nonprofits, but that could be a for-profit entity. A lot of them are mission-driven too, and so that's fully a possibility. In terms of what's changed, we have a fellowship program at this point. So we bring in about 10 people a year different skill sets, data scientists, data engineers, front-end developers, who are committing a year to working on data for social good problems. And then we are now housed underneath Tech Impact. So we spun out as our own organization and then spun in and merged with Tech Impact. And so now we're a division of Tech Impact at this point. So a lot of amazing stuff going on.
Can you share some specific examples? Are you allowed to share some?
I can
with clients?
definitely share some things. We've done a couple of interesting projects. I often say that our work is focused on understanding equitable distribution of resources. So when you go look at the core of what our projects are, they kind of all have that at the central theme of what they are. A great example is we did some work on emergency rental assistance. So as we're aware, there's a housing crisis. People weren't getting paid, they couldn't pay rent, and government stepped in and had a program, emergency rental assistance program, to help with that. And so we partnered with the Delaware State Housing Authority to build some models to assist, particularly on the marketing side. So making sure that people knew about that program, that they were targeting the right areas to bring people in, and built some really interesting models based upon some equity measures to figure out, okay, this census tract has not gotten enough applications. We need to divert our marketing attention there in order to get more people. We did some really interesting work with telehealth as well. Obviously, that exploded during the pandemic.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And so the question is,
stay.
it's here to stay, 100%.
It's not changing.
But the question is that being utilized equitably across the state? So where is it being used more? Where is it being used less? What actions could we take to address that? So those are some pretty good examples of the type of work we typically find ourselves doing.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
I love it.
And you also mentioned University of Delaware, well, both of you did. You teach a course at the university that's...
I do. So I teach a course called Foundations of R. If you're not familiar with data, there's really two programming languages that people use primarily to work with data. Those are R and Python, and then SQL is the other one that's kind of the backbone of everything going on. So R is one of those languages. It was my first love as a programming language, and my goal with that course has been, I want to help people interested in making that transition into doing more advanced data things have an easier time doing it. The course is basically built to answer all the questions that I had when I first started and was confused about things. So it's very project-based, very business question-driven, essentially, and really great for either the person who they identify as a heavy Excel user and want to push that skill set forward a little bit.
Say, I love a good spreadsheet. Where you're telling me you could level me up.
I do also love a good spreadsheet. I also really love not working with spreadsheets ever anymore in my day-to-day
I
life.
can't even imagine my life without spreadsheets.
Yeah, that's actually the funny thing. Data scientists do not use spreadsheets at all.
Yeah.
Like
Fun
I don't
fact.
open Excel ever, which is the number one surprising thing that people hear when they're talking to me. So, yeah.
Have you skilled up from spreadsheets?
Yes, we have. Actually, we have. Our tech, what we did during the pandemic is we explored what systems were really feasible for our size business, all right? And will give us the output. And I loved Excel in the past, but I knew that I did not want an Excel spreadsheet in front of me, all right? And so as a result, we just recently migrated actually 2 of our companies, and one of our companies we were packaging it and licensing it to other minority contractors starting in October. So I was able to, I'm not a R or a SQL or systems, but one
you
thing
know
I
what those
can
terms
do,
mean.
but listen, but one thing I can do is I've learned how to build system requirements and specifications by writing out.
That's really important.
That's the first step.
Yeah.
And then acquiring the resources by saying, this is what I want. And most of my texts are like, what in the world did you just wrote out all the requirements. Yes, so whatever that coding stuff you need to do,
This is the goal. This is the requirement.
And you know here's the requirement. So as long as I'm able to write out the specifications, which we were able to do, we're now able to license the intellectual property piece of that and now resell it, to be able to help. And we also did that with Married to the Ring, which is what we're about to package so that corporations can integrate our framework into their LMS systems. So I don't necessarily have to be on site. Here's the need. We just need to make sure that you're a trainer, you're a corporate trainer that you already have in-house, can go ahead and use the same methodology in your processes. So yes, I'm sitting on the other side of the table by you, and I'm like, we are best friends. I don't know if I should have been a data tech or a data, but this is how you run an effective
I'd say just keep writing those requirements.
Right,
Believe me, the like technologists really appreciate some good requirements because like things don't get lost in translation that way.
No.
Otherwise, it's really hard. So
Yeah.
I love that, and I love hearing that transition you're talking about from Excel to other systems because I think the reality is Excel or Google Sheets are going to be the first data tool that most small businesses, most small organizations are going to use. It's that's just the reality of it.
Right.
They get into some conditional formatting, maybe a VLOOKUP, they're really happy with their life, but then at some point that's not enough. Excel has some real limitations, and so it's that moment where you have to step back and say, okay, what are the new tools that I need in order to meet my current needs as an organization? The second that you start to find yourself with Excel documents floating around that say like sales version 1 Kelly, sales version 2, like you're screwed. That's your moment of like I no longer have a single source of truth for my data, and therefore I'm screwed essentially. So that's the reflection point.
We can't do that anymore, Ryan, and we just can't. We can't survive in that culture anymore either. And what I love is when we discovered the one software that allows it to talk to all softwares, 80% of the softwares, we were like, now we have a single repository where we can do end-to-end business and then just have it talk to the output of our accounting systems, the output of this, and not have to do nothing. Literally, they just go ahead and add that program to it, and we feed all of it in that one central repository. So to your point, because we can't, most small businesses, let's just be very transparent, we can't afford what those larger corporations
100%.
are doing,
It's the truth.
but we can function and operate with a corporate framework that allows us to slowly migrate into a world of automation as if you're functioning at a larger scale until you arrive to that scale. We just recently have a corporate sponsor that reached out to us, and because we had requirements, they were like, wow, we'll help undergird the cost of that at a larger scale. But if we weren't doing it, and if we didn't have it, we would not have been able to articulate our need properly to that industry.
Work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, we've all seen the trends the last couple of years, but so many people have been moving around and changing jobs, and that's when systems like this are so powerful, because a spreadsheet is someone's head. And as you move on or come into a new position and inherit all of these spreadsheets, it's really hard to read that person's mind, especially when they're not there anymore. And it gets really messy. So having systems and processes in place that can kind of alleviate that and make transitions a lot smoother is very important.
Yeah, I think the key, and you had it dead on, the turnover rate, and then if you're looking to expand, and you're single-handedly running an operations, but you got several paid professionals, as long as everything is on your server, you can control everything. But yet, to your point, that documentation is key. Just to be very transparent again, most small businesses that are in my category may not have a statement of operations or operating procedures in-house. Well, I understand I have to, because of where the company is going, at some point. But when someone leaves and you don't have that, there's such a huge risk, because they're taking everything, the intellectual property, and large corporations don't allow you to do that. If you build it on their space, there's terms and conditions written in. This is theirs now, but we've built that on our side. So when people come to us, they're like, wow, Married to the Ring, did you guys lose anything? Absolutely not, because everything was migrated onto our servers. Everything was in a central repository. We have controls in place, and we had to pause for a second. It was okay to say pause, and we don't redeploy until these controls are in place because of the risk. So even on the data side, I think if people understand there's risk if you don't have AI in place. And what does that risk look like is huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
So question for you both. I will look to Ryan as the recommender and Tanya as, providing an answer on some resources that you use. But for small businesses who are looking for resources that are either free or affordable, because they're not that large business that has this huge budget to be able to dedicate towards this. I know the state of Delaware recently launched Size Up Delaware, a free online tool to allow small and medium-sized businesses the ability to access data and kind of project and help their businesses grow. What other resources would you recommend? And then what resources do you use that you would recommend to someone as well?
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's a couple routes you could take there. One is, how do I build the skill set of my internal talent? And another is, how do I get access to data that's going to help me beyond the internal data I already have? And so there's different resources for both of those things. If I'm thinking of how do I build my internal talent so that they can go from using that Excel sheet to knowing some more advanced techniques, I'll toot my own horn a little bit, but like a course like the one I teach would be great, and specifically look for University of Delaware's professional and continuing studies programs, right? There's some great programs there, not just mine, but about more advanced data analytics techniques. And that's just a good way to start bringing in that knowledge in-house that are pretty affordable. And also you can take advantage of, I believe it's Elevate Delaware, and the resources that they have. So that can be even more affordable, if not free. I don't know the exact terms.
If you apply under Elevate Delaware, they pay for the training. I know the staff at the chamber actually for data analytics looked into a course for the staff.
Yeah, so that's one really great resource if you're thinking of that, like that type of learning that you're looking for. If you're looking for places to bring in data, there's also some amazing resources. So for example, the state has an open data portal, and that includes a really wide variety of things that could be really helpful to think about the environment that you're doing business in, to make some decisions about that, or that you could augment the data that you're working with internally to continue to make better decisions with. Similarly, there's like the census. The census is this amazing resource that goes down to super granular levels of population, and probably one of the first places you should be thinking about if you want to augment the internal data you have. It takes a little bit of expertise to use in a repeatable way, but great places to look for sure. I'd love to know for you, like you're the actual business person who's had to solve this. I'm thinking pie in the sky. What about you?
Absolutely. So one of the resources that I have found to be, amazing, remarkable is the IBIS World Industry Report, which is what most corporations measure industry reports and data. And this information actually is available through the agencies, the small business, SBDC, the Women's Business Center, True Access Capital, as well as the library, the University of Delaware Library, who has access to retrieve the information by industry, which gives us trends and lets us know what's changing up through 5 years in your specific industry, what you need to do from a national and a local level. And so that is so good. And then the second thing that I really leverage a lot is I like Size Up. When Size Up came out, I thought I was doing cartwheels. I was like, yes.
That's great.
But I was like, who thought of this? I was screaming out loud. But affiliates that are aligned with my industry or are a supplier of my industry. So I'll use an example, Delaware State Chamber. As a member on the legislative committee, being able to have access to legislation helps us determine how to drive some of our policies and procedures in-house. So we look into that database that the House has, but we're also able to get clarification or guidance through participation by asking questions with the advocacy that the Delaware State Chamber provides. Another piece for me with regards to data is I am big on census. Census is huge for us as well in trying to determine how we're going to navigate through the climate. And also, I do align our organization with affiliates that are at a national level. So who are my suppliers? How do I reach? And since I'm now in the B2B space, I am actually a certified, I'm certified as a NMSDC, so as a minority, it's called the National Minority Supplier Diversity Council. So our supplier diversity chief suppliers across corporations are able to extract information, but because I am a member, we actually have access to the decision makers of those corporations as a member that will give us data that aligns specifically with our industry.
That's huge.
That's like but you go through an intrusive, I don't want to say intrusive as in a negative way, we go through a due diligence process to make sure being certified annually, everything is on the table, but that's to minimize risk and liability to corporations. So that global portal for all of the organizations or corporations, for us as a minority, we now have access to their chief supplier diversities across the globe.
Very interesting. Curious if you have questions for each other. I know this is the first time you're meeting each other, so.
I do. I'm like, Ryan, I just
Yeah,
want to
pick
come
his
over
brain.
there and be like, "Dad." I just, what's good about it is, as we start, and we are certified also, we're certified on every level, married to the ring, state, government, federal with the SBA. So we're able also to extract information through PTAC on types of bids, which is important, that aligns with our industry. But I'm very interested in seeing how we could extract data at the state level to be able to partner and understand specifically, the tools. Corporate and relationships is very different because it's more structured. It's in the private sector, but there are definitely opportunities in the government and the state where there are opportunities around relationship building, and how we feed in as a supplier is key. And so, I just recently had a conversation with Siobhan White, and I think there's some great opportunity, but you have data. I don't have the data that you have. So how could we as a small business, partner with your team to determine what you have available that is affordable for our companies?
So we only work with open source data. So anything we're working with, well, that's not entirely true. Most of the data that we could give someone access to is just already open source, right? It's the census, it's the open data portal, it's data from HUD, it's, most state agencies, most federal agencies publish data of some kind that you as an organization, you as a citizen, have the right to access. And it's really just a matter of understanding what's available and doing that due diligence to understand what it is. We have other data that's our partners' data that there's no way we would ever share with anyone because it's personally identifiable. It has all the data privacy is just such an important issue. We're never gonna touch any of those things. But that's the place that I think most organizations they just don't know about it. Even though it's right there in front of you, it's free. Literally, it's free. It's published in a very easy way to take advantage of it. But the resource is just, people don't know what they are. So how do you take advantage of it if you don't know what the resource is? So I think there's a gap there, for sure.
Yeah.
How can we work to close that gap?
That is a great question.
We can raise awareness.
It's really a marketing type of question more than anything else. There's a couple things. One, by making sure that interesting, effective data sets are made public and publicized. So for example, perhaps that's something about new business starts. That would be a very interesting data set that could be put out, that I think some version of that is on the state's open data portal already. That could be a very strategically helpful data set for most small businesses either getting started or who already exist and want to get a better sense of the landscape. So finding those interesting data sets, advocating for those data sets to be made public if they're not already public. The state has an open data council that specifically, they think about that. They're trying to be thoughtful about how do we build a pipeline to make it so that those data sets are available for people. It's an advocacy and marketing question.
Yeah.
Well, and that would be my next question. Who do you see in Delaware as helping be those voices?
To use open public
get that,
data?
to get that education out there.
So that's a good question. I don't know if there really is a single voice who's doing that, right? So if I look at the state, those assets are primarily managed by the Department of Technology and Information. They oversee the Open Data Council. They manage the Open Data Portal. Like I said, phenomenal resources. And I don't know if they're doing the work to do that advertisement necessarily, because that might not be exactly their role. So there almost needs to be some group stepping in to be like, hey, these resources are here. Besides that, ain't like a third party who can do it essentially.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because I would say about before we deployed Married to the Ring in our construction company, we partner with the SBDC. They had a IT director, and we had to develop technology plans for the small business. That was a forum that raised awareness to allow small businesses to understand, and it may be going on today, I don't know, but that was a forum. When that technology plan rolled over with the cybersecurity piece, it was like, oh my God, I never thought about that as a small business owner, to make sure that those systems were all captured with the plan in order for us to get the data that is required of us. And I think, to your point, there is no single repository. I think having these types of series or sessions and have an open dialogue like this allows individuals to be like, oh my God, let me take these notes. I can go here, I can start to query here, I can start to pull here. But I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you, every small business owner needs a tech. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, every small business owner. And so in their capacity plan or operating plan, I have one that's a paid professional. They're not in-house. You know, at some point in time, we would like to do that once we're able to expand our capacity to do that. But you gotta have a tech. You have to have someone on deck.
Well, getting back to,
Go ahead.
To the root of the whole conversation is that so many people, when they hear the word data or data, just don't know what it means. So what's the best first step for anyone? I think we can all acknowledge that it's important for businesses to pay attention and figure out what data sets are best for them, but what's your best advice to get them started?
My best advice, I mean, this may sound remedial, but it's important. A marketing plan and a marketing analysis is the beginning of anything to determine whether or not it's eligible. Because really, when a small business owner can craft that skill, they have to do it for every launch. Like, it's not a one-stop. It's like for any new launch of a product, any change of a product, you have to do it all throughout the entire use of your business. And so partnering with, where I started, partnering with the library, you know, but specifically in my case, you know, when I looked at the libraries across the state, University of Delaware library is specifically tailored to small businesses here for the state of Delaware. So I highly encourage the use of that library and the resources that they've provided internally. I would also highly encourage working alongside of the SBDC, you know, and those groups of partnering agencies, because we have strong partners across the state, to ask questions. And there were instances where even individuals were in a position and they may not have known the answer, and we had to take it a step further, but make sure that there's like this checklist. Maybe that's something the state chamber can supply, you know, a smaller size business, a checklist. These are things that you need to consider up front. Not something that will run them away, because usually someone's good in their trade, but they're like, that administration stuff we don't want, you know? But at the end of the day, I think a checklist, and then working with individuals such as your group, Data Innovation, to be able to say, how do we do these lunch and learns? How do we continue to raise awareness? How do we teach the business acumen, the acumen of data?
Yeah, so I think that last point is where I could build off of in saying, it really is about go find a problem that is at the core of the work that you do. If you sell an item, you probably want to start at a data problem related to selling that item. If you run events, it's going to be about running those events. Whatever it might be, find that core issue, the one sticky thing that has a return on investment. If you can just solve that problem, that's the place you want to start from. And I think from there, it's about just starting to layer in those other pieces we talked about. Am I collecting data the right way? Am I formulating my question the right way? Am I doing those things? But it all goes back to that. If it's like a side thing for your business, like, it's going to fall off the wayside and it's not going to matter. It just isn't going to be relevant. It has to be core and central to what you do. Take it from there.
Right.
That's great. I need to ask ourselves some questions. Event is a good one for us. But they're all problem solving.
Right.
And so kind of starting from the beginning, what is the thing that I'm trying to solve,
Right.
and going from there.
Yeah, if we
it's
take
like backwards thinking.
It is 100% backwards thinking.
Right.
If you get too far
It
in the
is.
weeds too early, you're screwed. On the event side, it can be questions of what are the marketing actions that I take that lead to the largest number of people RSVPing and showing up, right?
Exactly.
That's a pretty simple question, and it requires tracking all that information, knowing what it is. Is there an optimal time to put out the calendar invite for people?
Exactly.
Is it 7 days ahead? Is it 5 days ahead? Is it 3 days ahead? Whatever it might be. Those are all very data-driven decisions that have clear impact, clear measurable impact, and just formulating the question the right way is helpful. And those are the kind of simple ones, essentially. You can take it a lot further from there. So, 100%.
Well, this was an enlightening conversation today. And this is what these conversations are all about. It's bringing two members of the State Chamber together. Sometimes you know each other, sometimes you don't. In today's case, I think you're going away as friends.
I think so.
Yes, we're going to be best friends.
But just bringing two members together to really tackle important topics that are crucial to the business community. So I thank you both for joining us today. If our listeners wanted to get in touch with you afterwards, Ryan, how can they contact you?
Sure. Best way is definitely through email. It's ryanh@techimpact.org. Love to get in touch, talk about how to use data, whether it's mission-driven or just helping you otherwise and having a conversation.
Ryan and I are also personal friends, and it's true he loves to talk about data.
I do.
Tanya, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so at Married to the Ring, so marriedtothering.com, or you can do TanyaWilliamson.com, either one interchangeably. And on all of our social links and LinkedIn, it's Tanya Williamson. So, you definitely can reach out and ask any questions.
Awesome. And we're doing more of these conversations. We've got several more planned to go. And if there's any suggestions down the line of topics that you'd really like us to dive deep into, I'm all ears. You can find me on LinkedIn or at the Chamber's website, www.dscc.com. You can also find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Anytime.